Hi, welcome to The Peaceful Home. I'm Teresa Elling. I'm a professional organizer, parenting coach, and homeschool mom of 6 graduated kids. My husband and I also currently have 5 grandchildren and counting. This time of year, I get a lot of questions from parents about Santa. Did you do Santa? Did you raise your kids to believe in Santa? Did you ever feel like you were lying to them if you told them about Santa? Parents are really wondering what is the best route to take. Now, you might already have Christmas traditions in place and they're working for you, and I'm not asking you to change anything. But for those of you that are wondering, have questions or concerns, I'm going to try to address those today. One thing I know is there is no perfect fit for every single family. Each family has to pray and decide on their own what is best for them. I've talked to a lot of adults with a variety of conclusions about Santa based on their own experience. Now, my husband and I were both raised to believe in Santa for a short while, and I think we both found out pretty early on that Santa was not real, and we are not scarred, we're fine. But that has not been the case for some people I've talked to. A lot of people were devastated when they learned the truth. There are adults that really struggled as children with believing their parents. They begin to doubt, are their parents telling them the truth about other things, like the existence of God? Now again, plenty of kids just bounce right back. They get that it's a fun Christmas tradition and they're fine. For Kevin and I personally, we did not want anything that could be perceived as a lie or that we were deceiving our children. And so it was very important for us to tell them the truth from the beginning. One thing we did is we really just didn't make a big deal about Santa. We waited until our children began to ask questions. And as they asked questions or said, hey, my cousin said this or our neighbor said that, then we would address those things honestly. In the beginning, when they're really young, we would just say, oh yes, Santa brings toys to children. That's simple. We didn't make a big deal out of it. We didn't expand on the story of that or the particulars about it. We just didn't talk about it much at all. But as soon as they were able to understand, we began to tell them the truth about Santa. And the truth is that Saint Nick was a real man, a bishop who lived in the 4th century. So that's about 300 years after Christ. And he lived in the region that is now Turkey. He was known for being a very generous man. He helped his community, his neighbors, the people that he was over spiritually. And the most well-known story about Saint Nick that is believed to be true is that he had a family in his parish that was struggling. The father had 3 daughters and no dowry, so they could not get married. And so Saint Nick one night threw money, whether it was down a chimney or through a window, we don't know, and left enough money for the girls' dowries. Now some say that a portion of that money, one of the pouches fell into a stocking that was drying by the fire. And that is where we get that tradition of putting stockings out. And we always put out stockings with our kids. And we do stockings Sunday morning. That's a big part of our tradition and we love it. But our children also know the real story. Saint Nick actually was imprisoned for his faith for many years until there was a change in the government and he was released. He was made a saint at some point, I'm not sure which year, and January 6th is his birthday. And so often there are families that have the tradition of putting out shoes on the night of the 5th so that on the 6th, that morning, they will awake to their shoes filled with treasures. Most of us in the United States do the stocking version of that on Christmas Eve. And both ideas are really fun family traditions. There was one thing that we were very particular in talking to our children about, and that was that there are families that teach their children that Santa Claus is real and lives today. And we would talk to them about that and say, some families play this game, that Santa Claus is still alive and he comes on Christmas Eve and gives presents to kids. And we don't ever want to spoil that for other children. So if you talk to a child that believes Santa is real, we want you to keep this a secret. And we would kind of let them in on the club. Like, this is fun for some families, and some children really don't want to know the truth. And it's their parents' job to tell them when they think it's time, not our job. So we were really careful to make sure that our children did not go around telling other kids that Santa is not real. One of the things that concerns me about the whole Santa idea is that you really get away not only from the truth, but the true spirit of Christmas. And I think the traditional Santa Claus, who we write letters to, we request gifts, he brings gifts down the chimney, really puts the focus on getting, on receiving. I'm writing my list, I'm asking Santa, I'm trying to be really good so I get more presents, versus the true story of Santa Claus. And by the way, the development of his name, I think, is rather fascinating. You can look that up and see how he is known by so many names all over the world. But in telling the true story of Saint Nick, the focus is more on giving. He was a generous man who gave. How can we give? And because our kids aren't trying all month long to be extra good to get more stuff, it just shifts the focus. And for us, I just like that so much better. There's a fairly new idea that I'm sure you guys have all heard of, the elf on the shelf. And while again, these are traditions that could have their place and could be used in a good way, the way the elf on the shelf is meant to be used, I do not particularly care for nor agree with, and I don't think it is good for children. If you want to use the elf on a shelf as a very fun to wake up in the morning, find out where he is and did he get into mischief, and the kids have to look around the house and find him, I think that could be really fun. And I know a lot of parents really get into setting the stage for wherever the elf is on that particular night. That could really be a lot of fun. But the original intent of the elf on the shelf and the way that it's used the most is that the elf is watching. He works for Santa and he's watching the children to make sure they're good. What I've seen is that Christmas ends up being a month of threats for children. Rather than training our children in the way they should go, we threaten them. You better be good or Santa won't come. You better be good or the elf is going to notice and he's going to tell Santa. And these things are not about real training. These are threats to try to get your children's best behavior. If you are unfamiliar with child training or you think it's not possible to train your children, I would encourage you to check the description box below, the down arrow key, and I will link some of the videos that I have on training. You can train your children to come when they're called, to do their chores cheerfully, to sit still and quiet at the dinner table. And it's not about making kids do what you want them to do all the time for your sake. It's about training them so that you have a harmonious, peaceful home. And what that means is that you, when needed, can direct your children and you can know that they will obey. Whether that means you're in crisis trying to get the baby down and you need it quiet, so you send all of your children to quiet time. Or maybe it's they're running into some danger and you can tell them, stop, come here, and they will obey. I would much prefer that we are authentically training our children and then we are talking to them about heart issues. Where is their heart in their obedience to us, in their relationship to God? Because I'm more concerned that my children want to behave for the Lord rather than for Santa. But even then, Santa might bring coal, but God always forgives, always brings new mercies every morning, and he leads us to repentance with his kindness. And that is what I want my children to understand every day, but especially at Christmas time. Whether you homeschool or not, researching Santa is a great family project at Christmas time. You can do as little or as much as you'd like, or as little or as much as your children are interested in. But I would encourage you to do the research, learn about his names, learn about where he came from, find it on the map, do some reading and pull a unit study out of that. One book that I found is this one, St. Nicholas, The Real Story of the Christmas Legend. And this is written by Julie Stegmeyer, and it's a really lovely book. The illustrations by Chris Ellison are beautiful. And I'll just show you a few pages of this. Because of copyright law, I can't read you the story, but I would love to read the whole book to you. But this is one book that is fantastic and very factual. I really enjoyed it. And there are other books. Check Amazon, check your local bookstore, get recommendations, especially from homeschoolers. They always seem to know the best books that are out there. But start a tradition of reading about the real St. Nicholas. This book in particular actually does not talk about the stockings by the fire. It just explains that he put the money through the window and it landed on the floor. And so you could simply add where we got that tradition from, that the story has been told that one of the pouches fell in a stocking, and that's how we get that tradition. It's a lot of fun for kids to understand the parts of the story that of course are fictionalized, like the children's names, but the parts that we believe are true from history. So I bless you to discover what is best for your family. Take what I've said, take it to heart and to prayer, talk to other families, get other ideas, but be intentional about what you decide to do about Santa Claus in your home. Thank you so much for joining me. I pray you have a wonderful and Merry Christmas.